Hello, everybody, and welcome to Common Censored. This is a show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build. And
sometimes other stuff.
And, thanks for joining us. This is the thing. Hope you enjoyed our week off. But I hope you missed us. I hope you missed us a great deal. But it's good to be back with you, and we got a lot of topics to dig into. And, they're unfortunately, I can't say a lot of them are going to be the we figured it all out and all is going well variety.
Yeah, you sound preemptively depressed, I'll have to say, Lee.
I am not depressed. I am doing
preemptively.
I am doing quite well. No, do you ever have the, because I'm not destitute and I'm not wondering where my, rent will come from in a week, there's just a growing cloud of guilt as we hear more and more evictions are upcoming and that kind of thing.
Well, I don't feel guilt because I think, we are not the creators of this system. And as a good friend of mine once said, well, we were talking about white guilt with regards to Black power and Black liberation, but she said, I don't need your white guilt. It doesn't help me. So I think, and of course we can't, no one feels emotions because they think they're helpful. You feel emotions because you feel emotions. But I think, to sort of analyze that in our own selves, to think, okay, well, why do I feel this guilt? Well, I feel this guilt because I'm an empath. But in reality, there's nothing that this guilt will create out of the ashes of this shitty system. And so I think that, while I recognize that people might feel guilty if they're doing okay, I think the best thing to do with that doing okay is to find ways to assist and work in mutual aid ways with your community, and turn that guilt into a sort of proactive action. So, yeah, no, I mean, I don't feel guilty also because guilt assumes that it's my fault. And I know that I'm adding,
well, I didn't mean I felt like it was
I'm
my
adding
fault.
logic to an emotion. I know that, but I also think that this is also part of what the system does, right? Is it makes at the same time, it makes people feel like they're guilty if they're poor, because obviously that means that you must have failed. But it also makes people...
Well, we can agree they're losers. So.
It also makes people feel guilty, if their neighbors aren't doing well or something, or if, it's never supposed to fall on the system. It's always supposed to fall interpersonally.
Right. The
like
individual, yeah.
Right.
But blame it on the individuals. What was that? I saw something recently. It was like on each gas pump or something, they're going to start telling people to carpool and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, it'd be lovely if more people were carpooling. Also, don't try and put this on the individuals. Right. This, the oil companies are
100 companies
horrific.
Are responsible for 70% of all emissions globally. Fuck you.
Right. But yeah, no, I agree with your assessment of guilt is not useful. A useful feeling is to channel that guilt into anger, which and a desire to help. But anger often spurs on a desire to help, and use it as kind of a fire to get active. We've maybe turned this topic around where we gave the part of the solution at the beginning, but the first topic we were here gonna discuss is there's and I talk about it some on the Redacted tonight, how 1 out of every 3 American adults have now said that they have trouble paying bills or purchasing food each week. 1 out of 3, which is like 70 million Americans. Then you have new reporting saying that 30 to 40 million people in America are at risk of eviction. That's up 43% of all U.S. rental households. And we, as we're taping this, I mean, something could happen tomorrow, but as we're taping this, Trump has torpedoed this relief bill, which something I covered on Moment of Clarity, the video series, is the relief bill is garbage. However, it does keep some things going, which I don't deny, such as unemployment benefits, like increased unemployment benefits, and the $600 checks. As that, although that is way too small, it's still, for a lot of people, that is something, that is a lifeline. So, and let's be clear, Trump is doing this only, he says it's because he wants $2,000 in the relief checks, which is horseshit. He had his people negotiating this bill all along, so his people, gave his opinion to Congress before this. It's not like they never consulted him and then they, showed him the bill and he was like, what? No, they knew exactly what was going to be in this for months, and he did this and is collapsing this relief bill just because he knows that it puts power in his hands and it directs all attention at him, and it's fucking horrific.
Yeah, and the last I heard, he was chilling at Mar-a-Lago with not a care in the world. But you don't
even have to wear a mask.
I've actually never seen him wear a mask, which if anyone was going to wear a mask, it should really be him for many reasons.
Well, the orange makeup gets caked on the inside of the mask, and it's a mess.
Yeah. See, I was thinking like not just like a regular mask, one of those like masks that dogs wear so they can't bark, so like that he can't actually
Silence of the Lambs.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say an eyes wide shut mask, which would fit too.
You know what? Like Transparency. I have never seen that movie. And I understand that I've been missing out on a piece of like Hollywood culture there.
Full transparency, I am a huge Kubrick fan. I pretty much love everything Kubrick's done. However, I can't remember why. I got interrupted like 3/4 of the way into that movie, and it was not grabbing me enough to finish it, which I still feel guilty about.
So wow, there are a lot of feelings of guilt that are
there's
coming
a lot
to
of
the
guilt.
surface.
Well, let's be clear. Those are the only two things in the world I feel guilty about. Not finishing Eyes Wide Shut and the immense poverty in America. Those are the two things.
Fair.
But I will say this, that Kubrick died during the editing process, and then someone else finished it, edited it. And so I think that it was, I think that's what's at fault. It's not really me. It's Kubrick's death.
It's not me. It's Kubrick. Well, fair enough. The only reason that I've, because in Hollywood, the talk was, oh my gosh, you have to see the movie that ended Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman's marriage. So it's from that angle.
Is that the one that ended it?
Supposedly.
Oh, yeah. I guess it is. Well, yeah, but I don't know. Wasn't it always a little iffy all along?
Look, I'm not a marriage counselor, and if I would, I wouldn't get near that marriage with a 10-foot pole. But yeah, I think the whole idea of acting in a movie about like a fucked up relationship with your spouse is really just asking for trouble. Because, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, tangents.
I think you're absolutely right. Having been in fucked up relationships in the past, I find it difficult to watch a movie about fucked up relationships when I'm in one.
But hey, honey, I know what will help is if we play a really dysfunctional couple on screen.
Right.
But
so I don't know if you want to give some more of these numbers of where things stand.
Speaking of dysfunctional, we can all rest easy knowing that two new men have been made centibillionaires. Which, if you're wondering what the fuck that is,
that's when you make a lot of money from smell like perfumes and colognes and things.
No, this is.
I think it's cent. Actually, it's centibillionaire.
Sorry, centibillionaire. Which sounds really cute. Maybe that's why I keep saying centibillionaire because it sounds cute, right? Centi.
Oh, but you don't like centipedes. That's your problem.
No, I don't. They're fucking terrifying. Okay.
They're awesome.
No, they're objectively fucking creepy as fuck.
Oh, come on. Think of how long it takes them to put on their tiny shoes.
Thankfully, long enough that I have time to kill them.
They're sitting there lacing up for like 45 minutes while you're chasing them with a fucking fly swatter.
So, a centibillionaire from centi, which is 100. So basically that means that someone who has more than $100 billion of wealth, a net worth of over $100 billion, which if you're wondering what that is, it's the technical equivalent of a sadistic shit ton of money. And I say sadistic because you can't possibly have that amount of money without it being part of your MO to screw over a large group of people continuously. So
right.
There are now 5. There were only 3. But there are now 5. The new ones are Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. There are now 5 centibillionaires in the United States, and they are Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Bernard Arnault, and Mark Zuckerberg. And to be fair, Bernard Arnault is French.
Well, and the other thing we're not even taking into account is some of these families, if you were to combine their it's just that it's broken up among siblings. So like the Koch brothers or the Waltons, if you actually combine that family wealth, you'd have over $100 billion.
Absolutely. And so the 2 people that were added to this club were only added this year. So again, there have been billionaires have gained $1 trillion during the pandemic. Right, during the pandemic, at a time in which, as we pointed out, 30 to 40 million people are at risk of eviction. That's almost half of all U.S. rental households. 26% of children in rental housing live in a household that doesn't have enough to eat. 36% of adults are struggling to pay regular household expenses, and for Black adults, that number is 52%. For Latinx, it's 50%. And this is the reality of these are the players on this political stage right now. Are these people that are being evicted? Almost half of all U.S. rental households are at risk of becoming homeless, and then you have 2 new people that are inducted into the I have over $100 billion in net worth.
Yeah, it's totally inconceivable amount of. Honestly, wealth sounds too much like a positive thing. It's too much. It's an inconceivable amount of hoarding and greed versus on the other side a level of inequality and destitution that is just crazy. And it is honestly, this sounds like if someone were to in a fantasy world sit down and be like, I'm going to write a recipe for revolution. They'd be like, let's see, throw in 50% of all Black households struggling to pay bills, 1/3 of all American adults struggling to pay bills, over 70 million people. Honestly, what do they think is the and Wall Street? Look at the stocks; they're doing fine. It's all is well.
Right, and again, in this weekend, the as you noted earlier, Lee, the unemployment benefits benefits. We've already had this conversation. Unemployment, fucking rights. Yeah. Well, unemployment breadcrumbs. Because honestly, what the fuck? $300 a week? Are you kidding me? That's an embarrassment. But as you noted, it's an embarrassment that is somehow keeping a lot of people at least afloat enough that they can stay in their home, and that they can have some food to eat and basic human needs. And I just want to take a moment here to, we're talking about all of this, and one of the things that really hit me when I was reading these numbers earlier today was, wow, this is like the shit that they usually say about all those quote unquote evil socialist countries, oh my God, people are starving and people are homeless, and aren't you glad that you have capitalism because look how good you have it. Yeah, it's fucking wonderful.
Yeah. As we point to other countries and say, oh, that so-called dictator is really ruining things for the people. It's like, before our economic sanctions designed to crush them, Chavez and decreased extreme poverty by 70% and poverty by 50%. And it's like, we're doing the reverse. We're doing the opposite to like just harm our people. And meanwhile, the breadcrumbs that we're going to get dished out now have been torpedoed by a narcissistic, selfish, disgusting human being who just realized that people would talk about him if he like torpedoed the relief bill.
And this is, the situation is so dire. Like, people are talking about, well, if I don't get these weekly benefits, I literally won't even have gas in my car to go drive to a food bank.
Oh, God.
Like, that's the situation. Fuck buying food. Like, that ship sailed back when $600 a week was shafted, because a lot of people, a lot of the quote unquote supplemental jobless payments expired in July. So there have been other avenues that are filled with just fucking so many barricades and so many, what's it called? Hurdles. And so some people are getting like $100 a week, $100 a week. So this is, this is the situation for millions of people right now. And again, contrasting that to the fact that there are centibillionaires in the United States. I mean, this can't continue. And, as something that a lot of organizers are looking out at right now. Some of these numbers I got from PSL, for instance. A lot of organizers are organizing around this, not just to try and fill the gaps, of course, and try to take care of people, but to also organize and say, look, this can't continue. Like, not just this can't continue because we don't want it to. Like, literally, people can't continue like this.
Right, and then the answer of the oligarchy will be to further criminalize protests, to basically just stop people from daring to speak out against this. In Detroit right now, they're arresting and trying to prosecute activists that basically just had protests in Detroit for Black Lives Matter against police brutality, and they're trying to pass something that basically makes it illegal and a conspiracy to organize a protest. And that's going to be their answer, rather than actually fixing the problem, rather than actually helping the people. It's just, let's make daring to speak out against this illegal. And then, of course, in the midst of this, you have, disaster capitalism continues to truck along in other ways, such as pipelines that continue to be built, despite the fact that we're, 5 years from the point of no return for climate change, and we're going to just keep going down this road.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fight against Line 3 is shaping up to look quite a bit like DAPL. Folks might have seen that in the past few months there's been growing resistance to the construction of the Line 3, which, for those who aren't familiar, it's a proposed pipeline that would cross 200 bodies of water. 200. Including the Mississippi.
And all pipelines leak.
Yes, including the Mississippi River twice. If built, Line 3 would carry hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day. That's tar sands crude oil, which is the dirtiest oil in the world, and would contribute the equivalent of 50 coal plants worth of carbon pollution to the atmosphere. 50.
Jesus
And if you've
Christ.
ever been around a coal plant, that's fucking devastating. Now imagine being around 50 of those at once. Its carbon footprint would exceed the entire state of Minnesota, which is where the bulk of the pipeline would run, is through Minnesota, which is known as the land of 1,000 lakes, or a million, or whatever, however many. It's known as a state with a lot of lakes. However they put that.
I think it's called Lot of Lakes. Yeah.
A lot of lakes. Yeah.
And in terms of tar sands crude oil, what this is they combine this with other chemicals so that it's able to flow. It's incredibly thick, dirty oil. This is basically, trying to scrape away the last remaining oil from certain areas, because tar sands means that this is not like a big underground lake of liquid oil. This is oil mixed with sand and all kinds of other impurities. And so to get it to flow, they mix it with this incredibly harmful cocktail called bitumen that's cancer causing. And when this stuff spills, which I remember covering a spill, I think it was in Arkansas maybe, but a while back. But when this stuff spills, if it's in water, it first of all, even if it were regular oil, which floats to the top, most of it floats to the top, you can't clean up oil. You can pretend to clean up oil. You can push it around like a kid who won't eat his veggies. We'll just smear that over there and smear this over here, and then we'll tell people we cleaned it up. If you watch these videos, Exxon and BP and stuff will put out a bunch of industrial paper towels, like literally, as if it's doing shit. They'll watch off a few birds, but those birds represent whatever 1% of the actual birds dying from this stuff, or fish, and with the case of tar sands oil, it sinks. So it's at the bottom of the lake, or a lot of it is. So the idea that they clean up this stuff when there's a spill is fucking laughable. It's honestly, it's a show. It is like they might as well just have dancers out there in hazmat suits going, be my guest, we'll clean the oil up our best. Like they can't,
oh my God, did you just come up with that?
Yeah, I riffed it.
That was amazing improv, dude. I would never have been able to. Okay, that was just brilliant. I'm
quite the battle rapper,
dude. I'm so enamored by people who can come up with something that rhymes and like that has the right cadence, like that. I just because it's so not me. So well done, and you actually were in key, so that's also.
No, I don't think that's true.
I mean, it's been a while since I watched Beauty and the Beast, but I think that was pretty spot on.
But I wanted people to hate the oil company, so I had to do it out of key.
So this is absolutely important. Not only that, but this is also an issue that is incredibly, what's the word? It's amplified during COVID. Because the construction of this pipeline has been deemed, quote unquote, essential. This is essential infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And so
people living in their houses, not essential.
Well, right. And this
people not getting evicted, not essential.
Not essential. And of course, this, much like DAPL, crisscrosses a lot of, it's all indigenous land, but, indigenous land that is marked in treaties. Like there are treaties. And so the pipeline also violates several treaties, which with the Ojibwe people specifically, that establish their right to hunt, fish, and gather along the proposed route of the pipeline. But this, another side of this is that the COVID numbers have risen since the start of the construction of this pipeline. Because just like, folks might know this from other pipelines, they don't use like local folks to build these pipelines. They always talk about, hey, right. We might be terrible and bad for the environment, but at least we're creating local jobs. No, you're not. You're bringing in out-of-state people. And there's been a lot of reporting that shows that, for instance, while constructing the Bayou Bridge pipeline down in Louisiana, we didn't see one Louisiana state plate. They were like Tennessee and Texas, and like there was nobody from fucking Louisiana.
Speaking of this, so these out-of-staters come in and they bring COVID with them, obviously. And one of my favorite facts, I think maybe ever, is that a study proved that fracking causes gonorrhea. Because these man camps and stuff come into town, they bring it with them, they then go to the local prostitution establishments or whatever they have going, and it then spreads through town. So fracking causes gonorrhea.
Well, and not just not just sex workers. I'd say there's a lot of. This is the MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. The man camps are the primary connection to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Women are raped and kidnapped and in many cases murdered. And these instances can be traced directly to the instances of man camps. And for folks who don't know what man camps are, they are literally camps of men who are brought in, again, out-of-state workers who are brought in, live in trailers to construct these pipelines or other, fossil fuel infrastructure. And again, as with the Line 3, as with the DAPL, as with Bayou Bridges, with all of these, they oftentimes cross directly, not just indigenous lands, but treaty lands, so that they are reservations where there's a high level, a higher population of indigenous folks than in other areas. So
fracking causes murder.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes. As does, of course, oil, and coal and all of this shit, right? These projects are destructive in every single possible way, from the land to the communities that they break apart to the people that they destroy. So these projects are abhorrent in every way, and Line 3 is absolutely no different. And another thing that is similar to DAPL is sort of the rising response and the readying response to it. For instance, there was a report on December 23rd that said that there's a coalition. Okay, it's called absolutely fuck these human beings for taking something so beautiful and turning it. But this is how fascists work, right? Like the swastika was a sun symbol used by people from all over the fucking world. This group is called...
The eagle apparently used to be some sort of animal. So
the group is called the Northern Lights Task Force, and they are a coalition of law enforcement members from more than 15 counties across northern Minnesota. And they're from all over, but they're from all over the area, but they're specifically going to northern Minnesota to deal with the pipeline protesters, aka water protectors. So they have basically formed a coalition, and this is something that we saw with a lot of other with DAPL and with other big projects, is that law enforcement would basically cross county and state and all kinds of lines to form a collective. A collective of fascism to battle people trying to protect land, air, water, and life.
Well, good. It's good they're getting together and sharing and stuff.
So the statement from the group says that they intend to, quote, provide a safe environment that protects life, property, and free speech through a respectful approach by well-trained, disciplined peace officers relating to the lawful activities conducted by those who wish to exercise their First Amendment rights in Minnesota, end quote. That is the biggest pile of shit I've seen since I saw an elephant take a dump. That is fucking absolutely insane and absurd and disgusting. But that's currently what's going on in northern Minnesota. And for folks who are interested in helping out, there's a totally badass website, stopline3.org, that has maps. One of the really badass maps they have, or is this on the other side? Sorry, this is on the other side. They've got pipeline maps that show the route of of Line 3. They've got information on what's at stake. They have information on how to support and help out, particularly right now in the midst of COVID, when they can't necessarily have like a large camp of folks like we saw with DAPL. There's also the site welcomewaterprotectors.com. And folks can go there to see a really horrific but important map that shows U.S. pipelines and spills from 2012 to 2020. And it's just a map that it looks like somebody had like a leaking pen and they held it over a map of the United States. There's like all these black splotches and shit all over the place. So, and I'll put those links in the show notes as well.
Yeah, and they did you mention they also use like mercenaries? They have these groups like Tiger Swan that are designed to like basically not have to abide by the whatever slight tiny little rules police might abide by. Well, they go and they infiltrate and try and destroy these groups and get them arrested by the police for things that are not true, and yeah, it's disgusting.
And there's also there's precedent. We saw this down in Louisiana with the construction of the Bayou Bridge pipeline. There are police officers that will then moonlight as pipeline security. So there is no distinction between these two entities.
Mm-hmm.
They are one and the same. So the pipeline security often takes on the role of police and engages in violent acts the way that police do, with total immunity because they are oftentimes police. So
yeah. So let's move from that to other people fighting back in a different way. I know we're going from one fight to another, but I guess that just feels like our reality now. And of course, COVID just exacerbates all of this. On every level, I think that the corporate state is using COVID like the shock doctrine in so many ways, and one of them is that they know it's tougher for people to get together and fight back, so they're pushing things even farther than they would before COVID. But anyway, there's a fight going on in North Carolina, right?
There is indeed. So what's going on in North Carolina is there's a vigil that's been it's been going on now for more than 50 days outside of Governor Roy Cooper's home in North Carolina. That is it's to highlight racial justice. And I'm not sure if it's...
Do you think he's worried about paying his rent? Do you think he's on the cusp
right.
there?
He's having a
trying
rough time.
trying to send for relief?
So basically, the goal is to highlight the issue of COVID-19 in North Carolina prisons, and thereby also shine a light on the issues that of the incredibly racist prison industrial complex, and something that's important to think about, that I think we kind of know a little bit inherently, but it's important to highlight that whatever we're experiencing on the quote unquote outside is significantly amplified on the inside, right? So the ability to access clean water, clean air, clean food, certainly things like healthcare. If you could imagine that it could actually be worse than Americans' access to healthcare. But then, of course, things like COVID are that issue is significantly amplified on the inside. And for folks who are interested,
and everyone's on top of each other, of course.
Absolutely.
There's no such thing as quarantining, really.
Well, right, and even though the people on the inside are obviously quarantining because they can't go out, guards are not quarantining, and the staff at the prisons, and there's no shortage of evidence to show that guards are violent and guards don't care about the well-being of the people who are incarcerated. So yeah, it's the whole system.
They're making out with just anybody in the prisons.
The whole system is just a really sick petri dish for something like COVID to spread. And for folks who are interested in checking out more about the issue of the toxicity of prisons, not just the literal, but the systemic toxicity of prisons, I recommend...
That's how they get you. That's how they do it. They make the word toxicity hard to say, and then we can't tell people about it.
Exactly. Check out Fight Toxic Prisons. They do a lot of great work on that issue. But so the thing with North Carolina, which is a bad story, but it's also a good story because it has resulted in some pardons by the governor there. And what's really sick about these pardons, for instance, I'll give you one example. Ronnie Long, who's spent 44 years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. And people basically had to hold a fucking vigil outside the house of the governor in order for him to be like, maybe I'll go ahead and pardon this dude who didn't fucking do anything wrong and has spent 44 fucking years in prison.
It really, because I think something people need to understand is that there is no point that these people, really Democrat or Republican governors of states, are going to do something purely out of the goodness of their heart. I mean, incredibly rare. It's only when you see them do something good or positive, it's because they worry about the publicity of not doing it. They worry about their future either legacy or future political career or what have you on that regard. There's never a point that they're like, it sounds like this person's innocent, I should really free this person. So when they do that, it has to do with activists usually able to get enough coverage and enough stink and enough ruckus that the politicians, the governors, feel well, this will look good for me to do this. And one of the few examples of a death row inmate that was saved at the last minute in Texas was Governor Rick Perry at the time commuted this guy's sentence, and it had to do with the fact that it was becoming enough of a story that he felt it's good for his political career to commute to save this guy.
Right. And that's, that's a disgusting reality, but it is a reality. When politicians do things, you can usually trace the money. And when they do something good, you can trace the tireless work of organizers and activists. And this case is no different. So I'm not sure exactly what day of the vigil. Oh, I think it ends on January 1st. And so it's still ongoing outside of the governor's office, his home in North Carolina. But I wanted to share that because, it's something that has granted pardons for some folks. And I think it's a really important thing to do to highlight the disgusting prison industrial complex, and then of course draw those connections, right, between the prison industrial complex, between racial systemic racism, between public health and things like that. So huge props to the folks who have organized this and have been tirelessly holding that vigil. If folks want to check out more about that, you can check out decarceratenownc.com.
Excellent. It's nice to hear about the people that are working so hard. I just wanted. We have a few more stories for you, but I just want to take a quick moment to say, if you want to support the show, make sure it continues. Please go to patreon.com/commoncensored. We are not funded by anybody. We don't have any ads on here. It all comes down to you. Patreon.com/commoncensored. You can grab Eleanor's award-winning documentary at hardroadofhope.com if you haven't seen it yet.
There's a 25% off code that you can also use up until January 1st, and that is the word HOPE. So you just type that in at hardroadofhope.com, and you get 25% off.
Which brings it down to not much, few dollars, and definitely worth it. All of Eleanor's work is at artkillingapathy.com. You can email us topics or ideas or thoughts at commoncensored@protonmail.com. And if you enjoy this podcast and you wish you had more of Common Censored, well, you can get our other shows, which are slightly different, but I think a lot of what you love about this one will be present in the others. Eleanor's other podcasts are called Silver Threads with Carla Bergman and Act Out. And my other podcast is called Government Secrets with Graham Elwood, where I go through the deep, dark secrets of our government. And then the podcast that is basically the audio of Redacted Tonight is called Moment of Clarity. All of those are free on your podcast platforms. So let's keep going.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to share some other quick good news, which happened a little bit ago. If I can recall the actual date, I think it was December 18th, where the Navajo generating station, which is, as it sounds like, in Navajo country, in the United States, and they basically demolished 3 giant coal stacks. So in mid-December, sorry, it's because I've had milk today. I don't actually have COVID. It's just because I've been drinking milk.
I assume everyone is figuring that this is our final podcast. because you
I mean,
are on the last legs.
It's the final podcast of this year.
Well, I think they're thinking that this might be your grand farewell
So anyway, so there
before
are these
crossing over to the COVID.
No, you're gonna have to put up with me a little bit longer, guys. Sorry.
Mm.
But so 3 giant smokestacks that have kind of been a significant part of the skyline in Navajo country for years were demolished as part of the Salt River Project's demolition of the largest coal-burning power plant. Wow, hold on. The largest coal
Power pants sounds
pants.
awesome. I wore some power pants once. It did quite well for me.
Oh God, the largest coal-burning power plant in the West. So that was demolished in mid-December, which is really, really awesome. And it's an important.
I bet they missed that part of their skyline. I'm sure.
Right? Yeah. It's definitely a point to celebrate, but it's also important to highlight that there's a lot of work still to be done because there's a lot of horrific pollution that continues to be a problem in these areas, not least of all because of the coal mining, but also because of open uranium pit mining and things like that. But this is one of those good news stories that I feel like we should share and give each other a pat on the back for combating this and for seeing the death of the largest coal power plant in the West. And yeah. So it's just a little tidbit I just wanted to share.
No, I like throwing in the good news. People need that. You need a little boost.
If you want to see the the video of it, you can check out EcoFlight. They're on Instagram at EcoFlight, and they did, just as the name suggests, they do aerial shots. And they did some awesome footage of the felling of these coal towers. So,
I remember actually with Apple Standing Rock, they were making it illegal to fly a drone to look down on what construction was taking place or whatever. Yeah, you get to spy on us. It's funny they don't like it as much when we spy on them.
No.
All right, so we have a little less than 10 minutes left. What story would you most like to get to?
You pick one. I've been talking a lot.
Should we? All right. Well, in the interest of giving your throat a break, shall we go through a little bit of the Medicare4All fight?
Sure.
So, I'm not going to get too much into the tit for tat that's gone on online. I covered it more on A Moment of Clarity, my live stream, and you can check that out at youtube.com/Moment of Clarity. But most of you probably have heard something about this. Jimmy Dore helped create a movement. It started a movement that kind of went viral to demand that the so-called progressives in Congress withhold their vote from Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. She has to be, so she doesn't, it's not just, she does not automatically get to be Speaker. She has to win a vote of the Democrats to become Speaker. And basically the progressives, or 15 votes in Congress in the House, would be enough to stop her. So if 15 of these progressives, you can debate about whether they're real progressives or which ones are and aren't, but whatever, the more progressive people in the House were to withhold their votes, then Nancy Pelosi could not get her speakership. So they're saying, Jimmy Dore said, well, demand a vote for Medicare for all. This has created some sort of fucking shitstorm because there's a lot of so-called left-wing people that are not really left-wing, people like the Young Turks and stuff that, are left-wing on certain things, but on a lot of other things, they'll endorse Hillary quite quickly, and they'll support some of our endless wars or our war games, and even as they stand up against other ones. So, you'll see a rant on say the Young Turks or something about how you shouldn't have endless war in Afghanistan and bring home the troops, and then a few days later they'll celebrate, or a few days before, or whatever, not days literally, but they'll celebrate the downing of Gaddafi, and thank goodness NATO is there to go in and bomb all these people. And so those type of people are furious that this movement of Medicare for All, which is also supported by the Movement for a People's Party, many people there, such as Nick Brana and Chris Hedges and Eleanor and I and Marianne Williamson, Nina Turner, all these people are saying this is a good idea. Jamu Baraka has been outspoken about it, so they say, how dare you ask anything of the progressives in Congress? Our job is to dance up and down and celebrate them and never question the way they behave. Seems to be the point. And then there's others who say, oh, well, this is a bad move right now. You shouldn't demand a vote for Medicare for All because it could lose the vote in the House, and we need to wait. We need to give it time to stew and marinate, and then we can have the vote for Medicare for All when it's the appropriate time. Well, and I would like to hear your thoughts on that, Eleanor.
I am reminded, it's amazing how often I'm reminded of Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. It's like, I feel like he just encapsulated the next 60 years of politics in that fucking letter. And for those who haven't read it, please go Google that, because it's required reading. I feel it's vital, historic, but also very present information. And basically, his point is that justice deferred is justice denied, and he feels that in a lot of ways, he writes, that the KKK is less dangerous than the quote unquote well-meaning white liberal who says, "Look, I believe that you should have basic human rights, but now is not the right time." And that
now is not the time.
Right. And
later, we're going to get to it.
Exactly. And that is really much more sick, which is why it's also the kind of the same argument that I've made in the past, that it's like, I actually hate the Republicans less than the Democrats, because the Republicans, for instance, don't believe that climate change is real. So they don't fucking care about all the drilling and spilling. Democrats say that they do care about climate change and climate justice, but then they do just as much drilling and spilling. So which one's actually more fucked up? And I would argue that it's the Democrats and their perspective on things, and this is no different. And so the idea that, and there was actually a really good article in Current Affairs that folks can check out about this argument, and I'm just going to read real quick a quote from that article. Quote, progressives want to force a vote now precisely because they believe the chance they can secure the votes for Medicare for All in the near future is remote. If barely half of House Democrats are willing to co-sponsor Medicare for All, even while it has the support of 88% of Democratic voters during a global pandemic, what are the odds the holdouts will be more amenable once the vaccine is distributed and life begins to normalize, end quote. And this is the point. What better time? And there's actually also a historical precedent for this. For instance, the Civil Rights Bill was forced into Congress in 1963, and it failed. But that failure garnered national attention and support, and it motivated protests by people who would otherwise not have protested, perhaps. And in 1964, it went back onto the floor, and it passed. And the same thing was true with the Women's Voting Rights Act. So the idea that this wouldn't work because it wouldn't get the votes, that's not the point. Nobody's saying, oh, absolutely would fucking pass with flying colors. It probably wouldn't. But then you could use it as an organizing tool to say, look what they just did. They stood up there and flat out in black on white stood up and said, we do not think that you have the basic right to health care. And that is a hell of an organizing tool. And so that is why it's so important.
Absolutely. And to me, the dividing lines of this, hissy fit online, which has devolved into a lot of red baiting, calling Jimmy and those who support him Assad apologists, shit like that. Yeah, it's equivalent to red baiting, basically.
Has
you're communist.
Also weighed in on our
Assad.
healthcare system, or?
We're trying to get enacted an Assad healthcare system is what we want. But part of this hissy fit is really coming down to, I'd say, a lot of it is coming down to a dividing line between those who feel that change is going to come in this country by demanding it and people standing up and fighting back in a very strong and in-your-face kind of way, and those who think, God, no, it's best if we just kind of talk about it and we let the Democrats know that we prefer this, and then we hope that they will do the right thing by us in the House of Representatives, and it's possible in a couple of years we could get a guy on that committee that makes a choice about something. And like that, to me, that seems to be what you're seeing is a fight between those two sides.
Right, absolutely. And this idea that it really speaks to me to the sort of comfort of that like professional political sphere. The idea that, well, they're not the ones that are dying with no health care. They're not the ones who are facing eviction or whatever the fuck. So it's very easy for them to sit and pontificate and theorize about when it would be the right kind of time for people who are desperate right now. And that sort of divide is, again, why it's so important to not rest on the squad or whatever the fuck. Like, to not think that that politicians will make the right choices for us. And it's also funny to me because AOC in the past has said things like, well, we need help. We're just like 4 people or whatever. We need you all to push us and push elected officials. Well, folks are fucking pushing now, but you don't seem to like it. So pick a lane.
Yeah. And this doesn't mean she's bad on everything, but her words are coming back to haunt her because there's great clips of her saying, listen, we have to push Congress. We have to force these things. We have to, one of her famous lines was bring the ruckus. We have to bring the ruckus. And so right now people are bringing ruckus. And she's like, could you just settle it down and quietly stop talking about these things? It's kind of, really been this 180 in that regard. But, the other thing about wait for it is there is no better time than now. There is not going to be a better time. Right now, in the middle of this pandemic, not only is it horrific in general that people are facing this pandemic with 350,000 dead or whatever it is, and many of them are worried that if they go to the hospital for COVID, they will end up with thousands of dollars of bills they can't pay. And 14 million, I believe, is the number of people who have lost their insurance since this pandemic started because they've lost their jobs. 14 million Americans no longer have health insurance. So now is the time for those reasons. It's also the time because the Democrats have the House. They are within a couple of seats of having the Senate. Even if they don't win the January 5th Georgia elections, they could end up with the Senate. Then you have a Democrat in the presidency. So there is no better time. There's not. 2 years from now, the Democrats are probably going to lose a bunch of seats because this collapse is going to continue. The economic collapse is going to continue, and it will be blamed on the Democrats, even if it didn't start under their watch. And so they're going to lose a bunch of seats in 2 years. You will not find a better time than now to push for this. So the idea of wait for it, to me, is just fucking hysterical.
Yeah, of course. And it's the same argument that we've heard for for decades, really. It wasn't the right time for universal health care when Obama was president and the Democrats controlled both houses. It's never the right time for power to concede. So that it has to be pushed. And I think that this continued push is super important. But I would caution people to not trust people in office, and that includes the squad. Because as we've seen, like, and I'm not trying to shit sling at AOC or whatever. I know that people have like tattoos of her and shit, but like,
people had a good point that she made a choice to. Jimmy's initial call was to all of these, 12 or 15 members in Congress that are a little more progressive, and AOC made a choice online to jump into the fray and tell them to stop demanding this. So she's made herself the center of this.
Right. And so I think, like, but this really speaks to my point that, like, there are no saviors in the halls of the mighty, okay? Like, there are no saviors that are in that space. And that doesn't mean, like, I don't think that AOC is a bad person, like, deep down, but it just means that the machine and the way that they are, the way that their perspectives are changed by being in
Right.
those seats of power,
Right.
necessarily detach them from the will and the needs of the people. So do not rest on the laurels of people in Congress that you think are on your side.
Yeah, and we can wrap it up with this, but you're seeing firsthand kind of the slow capture of like a true progressive in Congress. I'm not saying that she'll keep going that direction. Who knows? Maybe she'll do amazing things in the next year or something. But, she showed up to Congress, literally went to a protest outside Nancy Pelosi's office, despite the fact she'd already won a congressional seat. Bring the ruckus. She was bringing the ruckus in the first few weeks to some degree. I'm not going to act like she was, throwing Molotov cocktails, but, and that has largely disappeared. She's not generally showing up to protests that I know of. And what you have is she's slowly being kind of talked into these long-term deals of like, listen, if you don't raise a stink about Nancy Pelosi becoming speaker this time, then we'll make sure you get on such and such committee a year from now, and that committee could help to have one more vote on the da-da-da. And the problem with that is, it's not that might not be true, but the problem is, that is not, you're not going to get any progressive energy. You're not going to get people are not going to get excited and demanding this stuff based on a committee spot you were promised a year from now. Who knows what the situation would be a year from now? There's just so many calculations into this, and so much corruption, and it slowly these representatives start to represent nothing, and they start meaning nothing to the people that are supposedly relying on them. And I think, in a lot of ways, we're slowly seeing that. I know she famously wouldn't speak out about what's going on in Venezuela, and basically, when she was grilled on it, our horrific sanctions that are killing so many in Venezuela, she said, "Oh, I have to look into that," or something. It's like, you shouldn't really have to look into this stuff, but she knows now that if now she's in office, if she speaks out against our sanctions on Venezuela, I guess she feels her political career in Congress is over or something. I don't know, but
yeah, beware of those who are playing the game of politics as opposed to living it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to head over to patreon.com/commentcensored for an extra 10 to 15 more minutes. Please join us over there. You keep this show going. There are no ads for anything on this show. There's no one funds it. It's all you guys. Patreon.com/commentcensored. Also, check out our other podcasts. Silver Threads, Government Secrets is another one, and Act Out. And we will see you next week.
Thank you so much, y'all. Act out.
Keep fighting.